The year was 1882, and Dust Creek, a small frontier town in Texas, sat under a burning orange sky. Wooden storefronts lined the single dirt road, their shutters creaking in the wind. The smell of horses, gunpowder, and whiskey never seemed to leave. In a two-story white house just outside town, Clara Whitmore stared out the window, her hands clenched at her dress. She was only 21, with soft auburn hair braided neatly, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Clara had been raised with Grace, the daughter of Judge Whitmore, a powerful man who held the law in his pocket. But today her life was not her own. Her father had arranged her marriage to Henry Talbot, a wealthy cattle baron from the neighboring county. Henry was twice her age, cruel with his words, and whispered to have beaten his first wife before she mysteriously vanished. Clara had pleaded with her father, begged him with tears streaming down her face, but he would not listen. "You'll marry Henry," Judge Whitmore told her coldly, "and you'll secure our family's future." Love is a fool's luxury, but Clara's heart rebelled. She wanted more than safety. She wanted freedom and love. On the morning of her wedding, the church bell rang hollow across Dust Creek. Clara stood in a lace dress, trembling as she walked down the aisle. Her father's hand was heavy on her arm, dragging her toward Henry Talbot, who smirked at the altar with his yellowed teeth. But just as the preacher raised the Bible, the doors of the church slammed open. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a dusty black coat. His hat shadowed his face, but everyone in town knew who he was. Jesse Callahan, the infamous outlaw. The congregation gasped. Women clutched their pearls, and Henry Talbot's face twisted with rage. Jesse's voice was low and rough, yet it carried like thunder. "She don't belong to you, Talbot." "Not now, not ever." The room froze. Clara's heart stopped in her chest. She had seen Jesse only once before. Years ago, when he had ridden into town to bury his brother. His eyes had met hers briefly back then, and she had never forgotten the fire she saw in them. Henry snarled, "You dare interrupt my wedding?" But Jesse's hand rested casually on the revolver at his hip. "I dare," he said simply. The tension snapped like a gunshot. Chaos erupted in the church. Some fled, others shouted. Clara's father bellowed, but before he could stop it, Jesse reached for Clara's hand. "Come with me," he whispered, and for the first time in her life, Clara made a choice for herself. She ran. They burst out of the church, mounted Jesse's black stallion, and tore across the prairie. Bullets whizzed past them as Henry's men gave chase, but Jesse rode like the devil himself was behind him. Dust rose in their wake as they escaped into the canyon lands. Clara clung to him, her heart racing not from fear, but from something far deeper. His strength, his courage, it was like breathing air for the first time. By nightfall, they reached a hidden camp in the desert, a fire crackling under the stars. Clara's dress was torn, her hair loose, but her spirit felt alive. Jesse handed her a tin cup of water. "You didn't have to come," he said. "Running with me makes you an outlaw too." Clara met his gaze, her voice trembling but fierce. "I would rather be free in the wilderness than chained in a mansion." For a long moment, Jesse just stared at her, as if he saw through her soul. He had always been a man apart, hardened by loss, but something in Clara's storm-gray eyes broke down the walls he had built. And that night, as coyotes howled in the distance, they spoke in whispers, about their pasts, their pain, and their dreams. Clara found herself smiling for the first time in months, but Henry Talbot was not a man to be humiliated. By dawn, bounty posters with Jesse's name, and Clara's, plastered every wall. Her father declared her kidnapped, though many in town whispered that Clara had chosen to go. Henry gathered a posse of hired guns. They scoured the canyons, burning camps, leaving no stone unturned. Days turned into weeks as Jesse and Clara moved from one hidden trail to another. They faced hunger, storms, and nights so cold Clara thought she would never wake. But Jesse never left her side. One evening, as rain pounded on their shelter, Clara whispered, "Why did you come for me?" Jesse's jaw tightened. "Because I couldn't let him take you. I've seen too much pain in this world, and I wasn't about to watch yours begin." Clara's breath caught. For the first time she realized, this outlaw had risked his life not for glory, not for gain, but for her. And slowly, under the desert sky, She fell in love. Their love was tested one fateful night when Henry's men finally cornered them near the Rio Grande. Gunfire exploded across the prairie. Jesse fought like a man possessed, his revolver blazing, but they were outnumbered. Clara, trembling, picked up a fallen rifle. She had never fired a gun before, but when she saw Henry raise his weapon at Jesse, she didn't hesitate. The shot rang out. Henry staggered, clutching his arm, fury twisting his face. "You'll pay for this, girl." He roared, but Jesse was faster. With a final shot, he sent Henry sprawling into the dust, defeated. The remaining men fled into the night. Silence fell. The only sound was Clara's ragged breathing, and Jesse's heartbeat thundering against her as he pulled her into his arms. "You saved me," he whispered. "No," she said softly, tears streaming down her face. "We saved each other." The desert sky blushed pink as dawn rose over the wide Texas plains. The fire from the night before had died down to a few glowing embers, and Clara sat wrapped in Jesse's worn coat, her hair tangled by the wind. She had not slept, not really. Instead, she had listened to Jesse's steady breathing beside her, the safety of his presence more comforting than any church hymn she had ever known. Now, as the first light spread across the prairie, Jesse stirred. He pushed back his hat, his rough features softened by the glow of morning. For a moment, he just looked at her, not as the outlaw he was, not as the hunted man the world had branded him, but as a man who had finally found something worth living for. Clara smiled faintly. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Walking into that church, taking me away, turning your back on any chance of peace?" Jesse shook his head slowly. "Peace ain't in the world I knew. But when you ran with me, Clara, I found something better. I found reason." Her throat tightened. In all her life of fine dresses and her father's iron commands, no one had ever spoken words that raw, that true to her. The wind shifted, carrying with it the distant sound of church bells from Dust Creek. For a moment, Clara thought of her father, of the life she had abandoned. The girl she had been was gone now. In her place stood a woman who had chosen her own fate, even if it meant hardship and danger. Jesse saddled his black stallion, then helped Clara onto the horse before mounting behind her. His arms circled her, steady and strong. "Where will we go?" she asked. "Anywhere the law don't reach," he answered. "Maybe New Mexico. Maybe across the border. Maybe just over the next ridge. Doesn't matter, long as I'm with you." Clara closed her eyes as the horse began to move, the rhythm of its hooves like a heartbeat against the earth. She thought of the mansion Henry had promised, the silks, the security, all of it a gilded cage. And then she thought of Jesse, his rough hands, his fierce loyalty, his unyielding courage. That was freedom. That was love. As they rode, the sun climbed higher, setting the prairie aflame with light. The land seemed endless, a sea of gold stretching farther than the eye could see. Clara leaned against Jesse, her heart no longer afraid. Behind them, Dust Creek would spin its stories, tales of a runaway bride and the outlaw who stole her away. Some would call it scandal. Others would call it tragedy. But to Clara, it was neither. It was salvation. The outlaw hadn't just stolen her from the altar. He had stolen her chains, her fears, her silence, and in their place he had given her wings. Jesse tightened his hold as the stallion galloped faster, chasing the horizon. Clara lifted her face to the wind, her laughter rising like music across the empty plains. They were fugitives, yes. Hunted, yes. But in that moment, under the vast American sky, they were something greater. They were free. And no lawman, no judge, no cattle baron could ever take that away.